Tickets are now on sale for Rebels of Disclosure 2025, May 12th through the 15th in Grafton, Illinois at the beautiful Pier Marquette Lodge and Conference Center. Make sure you take advantage of the early bird specials before Black Friday. This will be a 4-day event with 12 speakers covering topics such as ET contact, experiencer testimonies, lost history, secret space programs, time travel, Illuminati, parallel realities, and so much more. Visit journeytotruth.online for more details. Make sure to grab your ticket today before the early bird special ends on Black Friday. We hope to see you there.
That's no moon. It's a space station.
Hey guys, welcome back to the show. As always, a few quick announcements before we get started. We just announced our conference tickets are on sale. Rebels of Disclosure 2025, May 12th through the 15th in Grafton, Illinois at the Pier Marquette Lodge and Conference Center once again. And all of that information is available at journeytotruth.online this year. The website is not Rebels of Disclosure anymore. It's just our regular website. So if you're looking for information, journeytotruth.online, and there's portals to all the conference information and ticketing there. The link is below in the description. Take advantage of the early bird special. It ends on Black Friday. You can save a considerable amount of money on the live stream pass and the 4-day pass if you get your ticket before Black Friday. So I recommend everybody do that. And if you are serious about coming and you want to stay on site, I would book your room immediately because it's already filling up like quick. So
every year it fills up really fast.
Right. So take advantage of that. You know, obviously there's always places to stay in town and Airbnbs and camping, but if you want to stay in the lodge itself, I would do that now. Don't waste any time because it could be a matter of days. So, and also I will be presenting at the Springfield XCon event this weekend. I know it's super last minute. It's literally starts tomorrow, but if you feel compelled at all to drive out to Springfield and you're in the area, Springfield, Missouri.
Yeah. There's a Springfield in every state.
Yeah,
so
I know.
You gotta be very specific.
Springfield, Missouri.
You're going to go to like Illinois or some other state. Yeah.
Right. But my presentation is on Sunday. So if anyone's interested in coming out, I'm speaking on Sunday on the history of the secret space program, and I'm really excited about my talk. Margie just gave me a longer time slot after I talked to her because I was like, I can't do this in an hour. So I'm excited. Anyway, that link is below in the description as well. So the guest today is actually a longtime friend of Erin's and a new friend of mine as well. But Erin met her years ago, I guess towards the beginning of his awakening, and they've lived together even at one point.
Yep.
And
for a year.
Yeah.
Yep.
And along that journey, along the way, Erin would tell me all the time about these amazing stories that Chastity has.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, you know, everybody has amazing stories, right? But then I finally heard some of your interviews and I was like, oh, like this is amazing. And
like I told you.
right. It's really some next level stuff. And I feel like you're just kind of like a sleeper, like you're holding on to all this information and not many people know about you. So here we are giving you an opportunity to share your story. I know you did some other interviews in the past, but welcome to the show, Chastity. We're very excited to have you here.
Thank you.
Yeah. So
great to have you finally.
Right. Mm-hmm.
I feel like you and I have been like talking about this for a
while.
A
long time, yeah.
Like, when are you gonna come on the show? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
At some point,
honestly, you know, at the beginning, after we had that frequency harassment that I had, and I was a little scared to come out and say anything because, you know, they had targeted my husband and some other friends that I had, and I had to raise my kids, so I took a backseat.
Right. Yeah. Understandably.
Yeah. Totally understandable. Yeah.
There are, you know, the people that it seems like the people that have the good information all have kids and they don't want to talk because they want to protect their kids, which I fully understand. And I would be the same way. And I
Yeah.
don't blame you at all. It's wise because once you understand the lengths they go to and how they won't just go for you, they work through the people around you, then you have to take, extra steps like that. So we appreciate you stepping forward and joining us today. And I know you have an incredible story that starts at childhood, right? And you've had just these amazing, I guess, sightings, visitations. You've seen a lot of stuff, but I would like to kind of fast forward a little bit and start at a part of your story where you were visited by a blue orb, and that orb led to you eventually being taken on a ship. And then that leads to so many more amazing things that we can get into. And then maybe we could start there and then kind of fill in the blanks about what happened in your life after that, if you're okay with that.
Okay. Okay. So, it was when I was married, and I would say it was about roughly between 2006 and 2010 that I started having really strong messages come forth that I would write down during the day. And it usually happened, of course, when I was in the shower or the bathroom or something. Something about the water actually helps amplify all of that. But at night, I would have this orb come in, and it would start like as a pinprick, and then it would just drop down like a teardrop, and it was blue, and like an electric blue. And it would do that, and I would just stare at it, wondering if anybody else could see it, and nudge my husband a couple of times. Hey, can you see this? He's like, what? No, I don't see anything. And so I would just like look at it. Sometimes I would put my hand in it eventually, and my hand didn't disappear that I know of, and I didn't feel anything different, but it was like hypnotizing, just the blue orb like a teardrop. And then I started eventually having more like sci-fi dreams, and I went onto, I think it was a Pleiadian ship. It was definitely Galactic Federation. Around this time too, I was also talking to somebody named Merlin, and his wife is the great granddaughter of the king and queen of Hawaii. And Merlin had told me that about a little bit about the ships, as far as, like that they were out there, told me their classes and stuff like that. I had no clue what he was talking about. And when I went onto the ship, they gave me an outfit that was white, and it was very form-fitting, and there were no zippers, no pockets that I remember. And to get in and out, you rubbed your hand down and then back up, down to open, up to close. And it was very comfortable. It just felt like you had on clothing that was part of your body. And then I was given a tour. Inside of my room, there was like a ambience light that it was to give you like the time of day simulation. And there was a bed, there was a couch, there was a restroom, but it wasn't anything like what we are used to. And to be honest, I don't remember but having to use it once, because it seemed like the suit like maybe absorbed things. I don't know. But I just didn't have to use it. And then there was a replicator, and that was in the wall, and basically you just thought about what you would like, and it would make it. It tapped into your thoughts, and it would make it. And then when we exited, it was almost like living in a mall where you have where you can overlook the different levels and see the other shops. It was like that. And it kind of did have shops, but you didn't have to pay to use them. The floor that I remember the most of was the children's floor, the educational floor. And the kids were using holograms, and the kinetics, I think is what it's called, where they make the objects float. They were practicing having blocks float in the air.
Telekinesis.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then they had these chairs that kind of looked like egg-shaped that they sat in, and they would look at a screen and it just kind of flashed different things towards them. It was almost more like a triggering. It didn't seem to teach like long lessons like what we're used to going to with classes. It was just almost like a triggering to remembering. And the kids weren't very old. I would say at most maybe 10. And they were enjoying themselves. It was playful. It wasn't rigid and structured and strict. And so then the other place that I remember was the meeting hall that they took me to. And I had been in it before, but I didn't remember the ship being attached to this hall. So maybe there's a connection that they made to stop there. But I went down this long hallway that had like a red carpet, and out the sides you could see space. And you just walked and walked. And then you came to these big, massive doors. And there was also a way to go up and down. And you go into this meeting hall, and it reminded me, I don't think at that time that I had this happen, that this was a thing, but I saw it when they did it on Star Wars. And Luke's wife, not Luke's wife, Anakin's wife. Can't remember what her name is. So when she went in before the council, it was a lot like that. There were these pods that kind of jutted out in like a half circle, and there was like 3 seats in the back, and then there was a seat in the front, a seat or 2 in the front. And I remembered being one of those 3 people that would sit in the back, and we had these tablets. They were about the size of a regular tablet that we have now, but they were flat and you could shake them. They rolled up. You didn't have to use a stylus or anything. You could just use your finger or whatever. But they were really like a bookmark type flat, and they were clear until they were activated. And what we were doing was we were reading the other people that were testifying or talking. We were reading their energy, and we would put down, the 3 of us, what we had thought individually, and then they would compile that to see what was really going on behind the scenes of the meeting that was going on. And I remember being used like that in that particular meeting place. And it was part of the Galactic Federation.
So it was like an intuitive empath type of thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So people were testifying, and they brought you
They
in.
were having meetings about what was going on in the galaxy, in the universe, on the planets. And I don't remember all of it. I just remember, I don't really remember what they were saying, because I was tuning into how they were saying it and the energy that was either being guarded or put forth, their intentions.
I see.
So
that makes a lot of sense, though. If you're focused on that, you're not really focused on the words, right? The energy behind it. That's how you detect deception.
Right. That's what we were there for, was to detect deception.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah.
Okay, so was there more to this memory, or was
that was brought up when I saw the place, when I walked into it after, when I was taken onto the ship. So I remembered that, and they told me to remember this place because I was going to testify there one of these days. And I was like, oh, okay. And I didn't know why I hadn't had the full recall of why, but I do know now, because I found out later. But we went back onto the ship, and I remember just kind of walking around. There was this really huge plant at the top. It was kind of the shape of a diamond. So there was the top of it here, and then it went down, and then it came to like this. And I don't know where, I didn't see like the control room or the driving room or anything technical like that or mechanical like that. But I saw this big plant that was in the middle hanging, and for all the floors. And I said, wow, that's really pretty. How does that keep growing? There's no sunlight up here. And they said, oh, well, then I noticed that there weren't any lights. And they said, well, that was all something that actually was generated by us, and that the plant was there to help with the oxygen and the purification of the air. So they didn't have all of these different mechanical systems running to keep the air pure for everybody. They had plants.
Makes so much more sense. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I was like, wow, okay. And that's really all I remember. I know they had a place for exercising. And then, of course, everybody ate together. The families were on one floor, and then the single people had their floor. There was a place for gathering and dining together, like going out to eat. It was like a little city.
Wow.
So, but it wasn't a little city. It was more big, but to me,
Yeah.
I mean, that aligns with a lot of the testimonies we hear about these ships. And, very Star Trek like, reminiscent of Star Trek, but that comes from something, comes from somewhere. And okay, so after that, I believe you mentioned in a previous interview about having downloads from somebody named Mira. What did this come after you were brought to the ship?
Yeah. So it was a couple years, maybe I would say 3 to 5 years after that my husband got sick. He had cancer, and we were fighting against Wells Fargo in the court system because during that time, so I guess this would have been between 2008, 2010, or well, is that right? Yeah, 2008, 2010. That was during that whole robo signing that was going on with the mortgages, and a lot of people were losing their houses because they couldn't really afford them, but they got the loan anyways. And then they had been lumped together and sold on the market as for pennies on the dollar in this large package of failing mortgages. And they were doing this with robo signing. And we actually missed that, but found out that ours should have been part of it, but we were able to pay when other people weren't. And so, but then when he got sick, then we were having trouble, and because he couldn't work. And so we were going up against Wells Fargo, and we were doing, we weren't being represented by anybody but ourselves. I wrote up the documents for everything with the help of a man in Florida named Eric. And he and I were working on the basis that the government was fraudulent, and that, that whole straw man issue thing.
Right.
And when we finally went up against, it was the last final day that we were going in. We had been fighting them for a year. I was, the guy that was representing Wells Fargo was the professor of law from the university in Wichita. And there was a murder trial going on in the judge's chambers, or not chambers, but his court. And so he told us, he said, I don't do this very often, but I'm going to ask you to come into the chambers and welcome you there because you guys understand the law. And we were just like, wow. And so what had happened is, like, either that morning while I was getting ready, or the few days before that, Mira had come to me and told me that what I was doing was setting a precedence for common law in the court system. And that because I was able to carry forth everything to the very end, that it was going to be recorded in the court system. And so it would make a place for future grievances to be sought after, because we didn't win. And then also to show what was being done in the courts that was wrong against humanity. And so she said that it was setting precedents for the future hearings that would make things that were wrong right.
Wow.
And I felt it going in. It was some heavy, heavy, heavy energy that we came up against. And then the fact that they were having the murder trial that they were trying was the Carr brothers, and they had slaughtered 4 people. And it was very synchronistic that it was that particular case, because I lived down the street from when that happened, and I had a visitor that I did not know who it was. It was in the middle of a snowstorm, and this lady came running up to my porch and banging on my door, had her driver's license, wanting me to let her in. And I was like, no, I'm a single mom. I was like, hell no.
Right.
And so then the next thing I know, these people are in a field murdered down the road from me. And I was like, oh my God, what if that was one of those people? And I never did find out if it was or not, but it was their case that was on trial in the court of the judge that we were, that was overseeing our case. And so we went in to the judge's chambers, and this is my chambers, and these are my books, and this is all my knowledge, and I'm welcoming you in here, and you should feel very honored. And I was just like, yeah, wow, this is an honor, And we had a check that was made according to the law books, the original law books, but they would not accept it. And so we ended up losing our house, and our stack of papers when we were done was about this thick. And after we were done, they wanted to talk to us, the judge and the professor. And they wanted to know how we came to know this information that we knew. And we said, well, it's right there for anybody to read. And you just have to be smart enough to understand it. And they said, yeah, well, obviously you're smart enough to understand it. Who taught you? And Brian, he says, well, my wife did most of the work. And he goes, so you coached him? And I said, yeah. And he said, so you put together all these papers? And I said, yes. And he said, wow. He goes, have you ever wanted to be an attorney or anything? And I said, actually, I remember coming and talking to you about that, but I asked you if I had to lie, if I would have to represent somebody that I knew was guilty. And you told me, yes, I would. So I didn't want to be an attorney because I don't want to lie. That goes against my value system. Right. And he was like, oh, wow. Okay. He goes, I kind of remember that. And I said, well, that was a while ago. And he said, well, you're better than my 4-year students. And he said, to have you tell me that you are self-taught, he said, I would love to have you come to class so I can brag on you. And he goes, because you do way better than they do.
Right.
Wow.
So that was the whole Mira story. And I did ask her, I said, when she was talking to me, I was like, how do I know that you are who you say you are? And she said, well, I knew you would ask that. So tomorrow, when you get up and you go to look at your channelings that you listen to, you'll see one from me so that you know that I'm legit. And I did.
So what you mean? So you like a YouTube video channeling, and it was specifically directed towards you?
I did what?
Was it so? You said you woke up and there was a channeling the next day, and you knew it
Oh,
was for you, right?
well, it wasn't necessarily for me. She was addressing the collective as a whole, but it was her. It was her name. It said that it was Mira from the Galactic Federation.
Oh, okay. I see. I see. So did she not tell you something about like didn't she give you the history of Earth or was that someone else?
That wasn't her. That happened before her. She was the only one that I can remember that technically gave me a name. Because I didn't ever think to ask for one. Whenever I got messages, I always thought it was the Holy Spirit talking to me. And I didn't know anything about a higher self or anything like that. And so I just took it as a part of God talking to me. And yeah, so I got the channeling about Earth before that, and that was really intense for me to get because I hadn't even stopped going to church at that time.
Yeah, so that's so I guess I was mistaken. I thought that came from Mira, but so would you mind going through the history that they told you?
Okay. So they were coming from the understanding that I had that of like, the Garden of Eden and the whole serpent and they're talking to Eve. And so what they told me was um, that it wasn't an apple, that it was actually a DNA change, and that it was sort of that it was like it was through the food that there was the DNA change, but there was also things that they did to tweak the DNA in the garden in order for life to not be as long and for knowledge to come in and so that they could be like gods. And that was I didn't understand. I was just like writing stuff down as fast as I could because I had never heard anything like this before. And so that was what they told me about that. And then they told me that the the snake was actually a reptilian being, and that they had been going from planet to planet to planet and solar system to solar system as they came away from the galactic sun, and they were called the destroyer of worlds, and that they had gotten so far out that they had finally gotten to our solar system, and that they were doing the same thing that they had done to all the others, and that was use up the resources and basically bring it to nothing. And so that was that's what I remember of it right now without going back and reading
Did
it.
they said something about Earth being or this being the final battlefield or battleground or something?
Yeah. Mhm.
What did they say exactly about that?
They said that they had tried to catch them on other planets, but by the time that they had gotten to them, that they were already destroyed and couldn't be salvaged. And so this was like the final straw. And it was also because we are so far out away from the galactic sun that from here they would probably go to another um, galaxy.
Mhm.
And so they wanted to stop them here, and they had heard the cry, and so they had um, they wanted to stop them here, and this was like the reason why it was the final place that they had to attack them and take them to court, so to bring them to judgment, was because of us being on the far outer um, arm of the galaxy.
Wow. I mean, that makes it resonates. It makes perfect sense. And it aligns with other stuff too. The outer rim, I guess you could say we're on.
Yeah.
So Man, there's so much more. I know.
And that also lines up, like, I know Alex Collier, I've been listening to some of his recent information, and he's saying that the the cleanup has been happening throughout the whole galaxy, but now this is kind of like the last, our planet, or in our solar system, is the last to be cleaned up, and that's happening now. And he's saying that specifically the Andromedans, who he's connected to, because that's mostly what, you know, he gets the information about what they're doing, and they have been up until really recently, they've been cleaning up other areas, and now that's done. And now he said all those resources are being allocated here at this time now to further help, which is good news. So we have a lot of help going on with this cleanup, but at the same time, they're not going to come in and be our saviors, because that's kind of, you know, it's going to be right back to, we're going to either worship or demonize, you know.
Well, there's also treaties,
right?
There's also treaties. It's like the law of
There's also treaties,
the non-interference. So they
prime directive, non-interference.
Yeah,
also, so they're doing what they can and what we can't do, and then they're also helping and assisting us to step into our own power and clean up our own mess, and
right,
you know,
like
kick out the bad guys.
Apparently, in no way are they allowed to accelerate the ascension process. Like they can like steer you, but they can't help accelerate. If they'll be breaking treaty. But
right.
So you mentioned also, like, I don't know how this story, like the chronological order of the story, but after one of these experiences, when you went back to church, everything was different. You actually started seeing demons in the church. Can you tell that story and what you saw and what happened after that?
Okay. So seeing demons is nothing new to me, but I hadn't in a while. What happened to me is when I went back, I saw, to me, they look like Dr. Seuss characters, and they ride on the backs of people and control them and manipulate them. Sometimes I see chains, and other times it's just whispering in the ears. A lot of times it's whispering in the ears. And then I started seeing grays. I went to a particular evangelist, and I had always felt very uncomfortable about him anyways. And at that meeting, I saw a gray, and it wasn't the little grays, it was a tall gray. And he was behind him, and it was like the guy was a puppet, and he was saying what he wanted him to say, and he was moving his arms around like he wanted him to. And I was just like, oh, I want to go. I don't like this. And so that was later, after my husband had died, that I see that. But so back to, you know, right after having the conversation with Mira and the whole Wells Fargo thing, I did my grandmother, let's see, my grandmother had actually started telling me that she was seeing demons, and that was in 2005. But I hadn't seen them. But I started having them, the church people that I had grown up with for about 10 years or more. And they were having very bad reactions when I would walk past them. It was like they would manifest demonically in front of me or just snarl at me. And I could see those things on them and the people of the congregation. And it made me very nauseous. I didn't want to be in church anymore.
Right. So so it was the people, the members of the church, like the pastor, the priest, like where did you see them?
It was a pastor and the wife, their kids, some of the congregation, and some of the other congregation. They were just sheep.
Right. So that's what I was getting at. So basically the church was comprised of demonically possessed people, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe we wouldn't call it possession, but it's an attachment. You know, there's a puppeteering.
Yeah, like an oppression. Yeah.
Right.
And I think it was through the sins that they had in their life. And I say sins very loosely because I started getting taught and remembering things about what sin actually is. And it's like the sign and cosine that we learn about in math, it's cyclical, and you have your peaks and you have your valleys, and it's actually it makes more sense. If you think about everybody's born into sin, well, it's also a frequency. We all have our own little frequency that we come in on, and that's our sine wave. That's our contribution to this orchestrated piece that we are presenting to the universe.
Right.
So that's our part in it.
So along the way, and we'll get to this part of your story, but you tried to take your own life, and you were saved, and you don't know how you were saved. You woke up and some things had happened, and it kind of steered you on this new trajectory. Would you mind explaining what happened?
Okay, so there were 2 times. Well, yeah, there's 2 times that I specifically tried to kill myself. The third didn't really take as much precedence as these first 2. But the very first one was actually I was almost 15, and I was at church camp. And I had taken, well, I was on an antidepressant and a tranquilizer, basically, because I was very angry. And so I had to take it 3 times a day, and so they let me self-medicate. And it seems funny to say this right now because I'm older, but the boyfriend that I had, he had like this perfect family and everything that I had ever wished that my family could have been. And he told me that God told him to break up with me. And I was like, why would God do that? I thought he loved me.
Right.
And so I was just like, I don't want to go back home. I'm tired of being beat up and dealing with all of the stress of trying to survive. And so I took all of the rest of the bottle of the pills, and I counted them. There were 64 of them. And when they found me, I had already started losing control of my body functions, and they were having to poke me with needles to keep me awake, to stimulate me to stay awake, all the way to the hospital, which was like an hour and a half away. And they had stopped the whole camp and were having prayer vigils for me to survive. And everybody that was taking care of me had a kid at this camp. And when I woke up, well, they had called my parents to come get me. I was in Missouri. I was in Joplin, Missouri. And my parents, of course, were in Kansas, where we were from. They told my parents to have a paper so they could take my body across the state line because I'd probably be dead or a vegetable when they got there. And so when I woke up, I heard my mom, Chastity, if you can hear me, squeeze my hand. That's what woke me up. When I woke up, though, I was strapped to the bed. And they had my wrists, my arms, my chest, my legs, my ankles, and my chest down, strapped down to the bed. And they said that it was because I kept trying to rip the IVs out of me. And they put like 7 or 8 liquid liters of charcoal in me to try and get to pull the medicine out that I had overdosed on. And they were just shocked that I could actually talk to them, because they said that I should have been a vegetable if I was going to wake up at all, and I would just drool on myself, and that was it. And so I was up in the room. They had a heart monitor on me, and I was watching Benny Hinn, and he turned around and looked straight at the camera, and he said, "You got a second chance. God saved you. What are you going to do with it?" And I was just like, oh my God. And so I was like, okay. And so I got all excited, and I jumped out of bed, and I didn't know what to do. I had all this energy, and they came running. They called code blue because they thought I was dying. And they came running in the room, and I'm jumping, and I'm like, and I got back in bed, and I was like, I'm sorry. and they were like, no, what was going on? And I told them, and they were like, okay, that's fine. And the doctor sat down, and he says, I have a kid at that camp, and they stopped camp and started praying for you. And that's all they've done since they've been there. And he said, all of your nurses also have kids there. And we have been just dying to tell them that you're okay, but we can't because of HIPAA. And I was like, oh, okay. And he said, can we tell them that you're alive and that you're okay and what happened? Because he said, you're not supposed to be here. There is absolutely no reason at all that you should be thriving and alive and okay and talking to me. And I said, yeah, tell him. And so that was where I decided, okay, I'm here for a purpose. And then, life went on. And the second time, I had lost all of my friends. They had turned their back on me, and I lost my job. I had just signed a lease on my apartment, and I was getting ready to have knee surgery. And I didn't really have anybody to help me other than my grandmother. And she smoked a lot, so I didn't really want to stay at her house because it messed up with my asthma that I had. And I was like, great, now what do I do? And I was just like, I know I'm supposed to be here and all, but you sure give me the shittiest life, and I'm really tired of it, and I'm done. And I was just like, I went out. I went out, and so I overdosed again. And this time I barricaded myself in my apartment, and I put on headphones and was listening to In the Arms of an Angel. And I don't know who was helping me. There's nobody that could have gotten in there. Nobody even knew that I was doing that. But somebody was sitting me up while I was laying on the couch, and I would vomit all the pills out and on the floor. And I did that repeatedly, and I think until it was all out. And then when I came to after sleeping basically the rest of the day, my Walkman with my headphones they were all neatly sitting by the couch or on the arm of the couch. And I didn't put them there. I don't even remember anything but sitting up and throwing up. That's all I remember. And so somebody came in there and helped. I don't know who.
Wow. So was it after this, whenever you had the encounter with, was it Michael, Archangel Michael, at the car dealership? Was it after this?
Yes. Uh-huh.
Okay. And so can we segue into that part? Okay. Unless, Aaron, did you have anything to add? Or
No.
All right. Yeah. Keep
okay. So, I started going back to church, and we had prayer meetings where we would pray for the city. During that time, abortion was really a big deal where I lived. We were considered like the top place for abortions. And so we would always pray about that. And of course, the other criminal things that were going on in town. And so we would take turns driving around the city to pray for the city. We could do it whenever, but I always chose to do mine at night. And I was driving around I-35, 235, and it goes in a circle around Wichita. And I got over by where it was Rusty Ford, their very first one that they had on Broadway and 235. And the lights were on. And I was like, well, that's weird. They're not supposed to be open. And I was told to go down there. And I was like, I just bought my car. Why would I go down there? But I did. I went down there and they were open. And I pulled in, and this is really late at night. I don't remember for sure what time it was. But it was late. They should not be open. And I pulled in and I parked, and I was told to walk this way. So I went down this aisle, and it was away from where everybody was at, the businessmen, salespeople. And this guy came down and started walking towards me, dressed up in a suit and all, looking like a car salesperson. And he says, so you looking for a car? He said, I see yours is new and you just got it. You have a 30-day tag on it. And he goes, is there something wrong with it? And I was like, no, I'm not looking for anything. There's nothing wrong with it. And I said, I was just told to come down here. And he said, well, that's because you're supposed to meet and talk with me. And I thought, what? And he says, my name is Michael. And I'm like, oh, okay. He said, I have some things to tell you. And he said, so we're going to pretend that you're buying a car, and we're going to go into the offices. And he said, I need to tell you what's coming. And I said, okay. So I'm sitting here going, is this Michael out of the Bible? Michael, the angel, Archangel? And I didn't ask him that, but I was just talking to myself. And so we got in there, and he just said, hey, to the guys when he walked in. They were like, hey. And we went into this office, and they were looking up. They're like, what is he doing? And he said, just do what I tell you to. And he gave me this paper. He said, you can act like you're filling it out. And he said, but I'm here to give you messages about the end, what you will see in the end times. And I said, okay. And I said, well, I need to write these down. And he said, no, you'll remember them when they start happening. He said that you'll just have a knowing that this is something that I talked to you about. And I said, okay. So he tells me these things, and the ones that have already happened is the military tanks being taken to different places in mass, and some of the exercises that have been done along the coastlines and in the waters, like over on the West Coast. And then the food, he said that the food would start becoming scarce. And I didn't understand that one until I was taking my macroeconomics class last year. But he said that the food would become scarce, and that there would be a lot of people die, that there would also be changes in the earth, great changes in the earth. And I don't remember a lot of the others, but we talked for a while. And I know when I left there, he did give me a card. I don't have it anymore, but he said, I can give you a card, because I was like, do you have a business card or something that I could have? And he's like, he goes, well, I can give you one, but if you call tomorrow to ask for me, he goes, they won't even know who you're talking about. And I did call, and they didn't know who I was talking about, and they even said they were closed.
Wow.
So I think that was just a divine appointment.
So you said,
Yeah.
and they also said that they don't have anybody by the name of Michael working for them.
No.
So I remember
that was the second time that had happened to me. The first time that I had an angel encounter was
let me stop you 1 second. Because I remember something else he said to you, or that you mentioned in a previous interview, about the inflation too. Like he talked to you about the prices of food and like the inflation. And what do you remember about what he said as far as that goes?
Well, he just talked about how the prices would basically double or triple eventually, to the point where very few could afford to live and have good food or anything to eat. And that it would just be so hard on people that that it was going to stir kind of like a rebellion type thing going on.
I mean, that's
And
kind of
that's,
where we're at.
yeah, totally is. I actually learned more about that when I was taking the macroeconomics class, and that was last year. I It was like I had the playbook opened up to me on what was fixing to happen for 2024, because we were studying the trajectory, so that, for class, and we actually projected that they were going to cause similar circumstances, or not that they would cause, because we couldn't use that word, but there would be a similar circumstance to the Great Depression in the middle of 2024 is when it would start, and that it would carry out until like about spring or early summertime the next year. And we were studying about how so first of all, I didn't know that economics was basically the science of scarcity. And then to top that off, it wasn't scarcity that was just happening. It was scarcity that was caused. And because what they do is, like, if they have a whole bunch of oranges and they need to get rid of those before they go bad, so then they drop the price. And then when there's not very many left, then they up the price. And they have price floors and price ceilings, and they set those in order to make the economics go up and down, up and down. And then what we were looking at was the fact of previous years where they had, like, told the farmers they had to all dump their milk, or when all of the poultry fires happened and all of the chickens were killed off. Well, I don't know if you've noticed, but this year we've had massive food recalls. And some of those could be legit, but in my gut, I feel that they're not, because of what I learned, how they drive this scarcity. It's fear mongering. They cause scarcity so that people start wanting to hoard, and so that they can jack the prices up, and they keep pushing them and pushing them and pushing them until people can't afford them anymore.
Right.
Yeah. And that's what's going on right now.
Absolutely.
And it's problem reaction solution. So they intentionally create all these problems so that they get the elicit the reaction that they want, so that they can then implement the solution, or will even beg for the solution.
Right.
Yeah. And they just have been doing that over and over for a long time. But now humanity's finally starting to wake up to that game. Right. and realize these people do not have our best interest.
I mean, going grocery shopping now has become soul sucking. Like, it's it hurts my soul. Like, I'm serious. Like, I just know it's wrong. Like, it's so expensive and so ridiculous. I literally been eating less. I'm like skipping meals and stuff. I'm like, this is just ridiculous.
Yeah.
But in a way, I'm like getting healthier because of it. Then I realized, man,
fasting is actually really healthy. But obviously, you fast too long, you die. You gotta eat.
Like 3 meals a day is insane if you think about it. Once you start fasting. But anyway,
intermittent fasting is great when you only eat in a small window every day.
So anyway, but it's just like the whole the inflation aspect of it like infuriates people, right? And like it is forcing a rebellion, and not many people know what to do. But we're gonna figure it out. We're gonna work our way through it, find our way. But it doesn't surprise me at all. Like, I'm just very curious to know what else he told you that hasn't transpired yet. Like this weather warfare. I mean, I'm sure that had to be part of the playbook.
Yeah. I think it was. I don't remember him specifically saying there would be weather warfare, but he did talk about the weather being very erratic and unpredictable, and just that it would be very turbulent. And that's really all I remember as far as that. Like
Right.
it was almost like he gave me nuggets that would trigger and then open. So, and that's usually how I remember or recall something is I get triggered and I go a certain direction and I just keep following my instinct or my gut instinct, and then sometimes I'm being told, look at this, read this, because that's, when I first started waking up, I was looking at headlines. That's all I would do was match headlines. And I did it for like 2 or 3 years. And I started seeing patterns in the stories that were being talked about. Like in certain months, they would talk about Bigfoot. Other times they would talk about the hurricanes, or the hurricane season coming up, what was it going to bring, stuff like that. And then there were different fires that stuck out a lot, because let's see, I had a vision, an open vision, when I had my first son in 2003. And there was a lot that was revealed in that of what was coming. And a lot of it has happened. Like there were gas explosions that were happening, and some of them were due to pipes that were old. And then others were due to vents that were coming, that natural venting of the earth that was happening, like around volcanoes that hadn't really been active or anything like that. And so I started tracking those kind of things, and earthquakes, the swarming that would happen with the fracking. That was something that was in the vision that I had. The other thing that happened was, and I think we actually missed that with Hurricane Katrina, was that I saw the Madrid fault line get activated because of an explosion that happened in there's a sinkhole in the bayou that was having a lot of the petroleums and different gasolines that they had stored in the salt mines under the water. They started leaking into the sinkhole. And I found out that that was on one of the 007 movies from old. And it actually exploded so much that it activated the Madrid, and it shot the stream, or not the stream, the river backwards, just like it did when it went off the first time.
Right.
And I saw that happening, but I feel like that was avoided somehow through a collective cleansing and purging that happened at that time.
Yeah, and it makes me wonder also some of the information that he shared with you. Like they say, just by knowing the future, you change it. So if you get information about these like devastating events, like now, like I guess it's not like 100% foolproof that it's going to change the outcome, but I guess it heightens the percentage of the possibility of us like altering that timeline, that trajectory.
Yeah. It's a trajectory.
Yeah.
There is no set in stone future. It's the now is all that exists. So that's why you get too focused on the future. Well, now you're not creating in the present, and
right.
And then someone tells you what's going to happen in the future or what's happening, and then you believe it. Now you're creating what someone else has given you, and that's the manipulation that the dark ones, do to us. All that they've been doing for a long time. They tell us what they want us to create. And we don't understand our power. We don't understand reality. We don't understand these things. We're in this kind of like zombified state. And then we just react to that. And then we end up creating the very thing that they implanted.
Right.
For us to create, because they can't create because they're not connected to source like we are. But that being said, there is a trajectory from the now moment that collectively we're always on a certain trajectory. And if we don't really change much, then that's going to end up happening. And that's what like technology like Looking Glass picks up on. It's like whenever you look into Looking Glass, it's at that moment is just showing you the current trajectory, if not much major changes. But like you said, just by us knowing, consciously understanding the current trajectory we're on, we can then consciously change it.
Right.
It's up to us to do that.
Right. And and some of it is happening. Like we can't deny the inflation and stuff like that. So in the weather, but you also, I know you were getting ready to tell another story about another angel. Was this the one where you met Gabriel and
No, this
Raphael?
was actually my personal angel. Her name's Luellen.
Oh, okay.
And when I was 14, yeah. Was I 14? No, I was 15. When I got put on, well, I was in the hospital for depression and stuff like that. And when I got put in, I had been going to a counselor previously, but he turned out to be a witch, a high witch in the coven that's active in Wichita. And he actually shapeshifted into a reptilian in front of me. And I didn't know that reptilians were a thing. So I'm thinking, oh my God, Satan's sitting next to me, you know.
Wow.
And I was in a group with other teenagers, and I had gotten close to one of the guys, and we had similar stories and situations. So we connected that way. And I had ran out of the group meeting and was sitting on the stairs of this church that we had the counseling sessions in, and he manifested into a demonic person, a reptilian, and that just totally flew. Man, I didn't know what to think about that, and I was scared to death. But I still remember what he looked like. Like, he had these black horns that went back like a ram's, and scaly dark green skin, and long black pointed fingernails, and he had on rings. One was a blue sapphire, one was a ruby, and then yeah, he just had this really bad odor, and then, like, I don't know, like pointed teeth, and just ugh. So yeah, I didn't go back to him, and I was really freaked out about that, because that witch was trying to put people in my path to get me to join them. They wanted me, and I was like not having it. And there was even a witch that I went to school with. And then I had people following me. They would sit outside of my house across the street. They would be in my dreams. Then they would be across the street sitting out there waiting. And my mom, at first, she thought I was crazy. And I said, go look, they're out there right now. And she'd look, and they were. They'd walk by my windows when I was sitting in class at my desk. They would follow my bus route. And I mean, I was just like getting really paranoid. And just with everything else going on at home too, I had had enough, and I started skipping school and drinking, and I still kept my straight A's. I don't know how, but I did. But I was skipping school, and I got caught. And so that was, my parents were like, well, you need to go to counseling. And that was also at the time when I had escaped being raped by a stranger. And then my dad's best friend had came into my room when I was asleep. So I had all this hit me, just boom, you know. And so I got put into this hospital for depression. And this lady came to give me my test, and she said, sweetie, come over here and sit on this bed by me. She had this really thick Southern accent. And she says, she goes, I know that you have to take this test, and it's going to be kind of hard. She goes, just do the best that you can and don't worry about it. And she said, but the real reason we brought you here is so you could be safe, because there's people out to get you right now. And this is the only safe place that we could put you. And I was just like, whoa. And she said, my name is Luellen, and if you ever need me, just call. And I was like, okay. She said, I'll just be right there. And I'm just thinking, yeah, okay, she's a nurse, because she was dressed like a nurse. She was kind of chubby, had curly hair and blue eyes. And I went down to turn my test in that I had to take, and she was there. And or no, she wasn't there. And I asked for her, but she wasn't there, and they didn't even know who I was talking about. And they started to think that I was hearing voices, so they were trying to label me as schizophrenic.
Wow. So a few questions about that. How did you know the counselor was a witch? How did you find that out? Or was it something that you gathered whenever you saw him shapeshift?
It was the way that I was being attacked in my dreams.
Okay.
Mm.
And then I would confront him. When I confronted him, he told me that we had been in a life together before, and I didn't believe in reincarnation at that time. And so he told me that he was Stephen out of the Bible and that I had been Mary. And I was like, no, you're crazy. And he was trying to get me to work with him because I could see auras. And I also had started seeing demons at that time too. And so it was kind of like with him, it was like an overlay. Like I would see him, then I would see the reptilian.
Right.
And I was just like, whoa, something's wrong with my eyes.
So,
Yeah.
so then with Luellen, it was just a human nurse, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting that the angels never like shapeshift into the angel, right? They always stay in the human form. But I
Yeah.
think it happens the other way around because it's like they have to tell you, like when they're deceiving you, they have to tell you. It's a weird,
Mhm.
like universal law. So
Mhm.
I feel like
Yeah.
that's why that happens.
Which is also why when you ask, they have to tell you as well. When you hear a lot of people say that, they said an entity, and like even when they disguise themselves as a loved one or something else, if you ask them,
Are you of the
either
light? Yeah.
either you're who are you really, or are you of the light? Either way, they have to reveal their true identity because of a universal law.
Right.
Mhm.
So,
Absolutely.
so I think that's part of it as well, is why they, like you said, you see their true form.
So,
Yeah.
so you weren't done yet. You actually ran into Gabriel and Raphael also, which is
That
like,
was in 2005.
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
what happened then?
Um, so my grandmother had passed away and my grandfather, and I had my son on the day that my grandfather passed away. And then like 4 weeks after that, my husband was hit by a UPS semi and was brought back to life and cut out of the vehicle and everything. Like he remembers seeing this big bright light, and that where he was, he doesn't remember what it looked like, but he said that it was very peaceful and he really hesitated on returning. So that was that year. That was what I call hell year number 1. But I had all of that happen and I needed some respite. So I went to a ladies' conference, and I had been, every time this conference came up for me, I would get like on fire. I felt like this vibration inside of me that was just like rattling my cage, and you got to go to this, you got to go to this. And so I was like, okay. So I talked to my husband about going, and it was in LA, and it was in the hood. Um, and he's like, well, you won't stay there, but you can get driving back and forth. And I was like, okay. So when I was, let's see, when I was coming home is when I saw them. And I didn't know who they were until I looked at their name pins. And I had had an amazing experience that whole time that I was there. And I was on a high, but I was really tired. And when I got on the bus to be taken to the airport, these men had sunglasses on, and it's like 4 o'clock in the morning. It's dark. I'm thinking they must be hungover or something. And he says, "Did you have a good time?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Well, that's good." And I was the only one there besides them. And he said, "Well, you should return faster than normal because there'll be a tailwind behind you, so you'll get home sooner than what you expect." And I said, "Okay." And I don't remember. It was just like normal conversation.
Didn't they know your name though?
Oh yeah, they called me by my name, and I didn't think anything of it until later. because they used my name. And I was just like, okay. Yeah. And he tipped his glasses down and his eyes were so bright and brilliant. And I was just like, whoa. And then I saw he turned around and was talking to me. And that's when I saw his name tag. And then the other one came up and said, well, I guess there's nobody else coming. And his name was, I think the first one, I'm trying to remember how it went. I'd have to look at my journal. One of them was Gabriel. One of them was Michael, but it didn't look like the Michael that I had talked to before. Okay,
was it Raphael or Gabriel?
There was Gabriel and there was Raphael. There was 3 of them.
Oh, okay.
There was one other, but he didn't get on the bus. He was just outside of the bus.
Oh, okay.
And so I don't know who he was. I just saw him. And I was just like, wow. Okay. So I remember writing this down in my journal about them. And I was just like, wow, like, I wonder if they're archangels too.
Right.
And I got home faster than I was supposed to by like an hour or something. And they even announced it on the flight. They said that, well, folks, you're going to be early. So when you get down there, your ride may or may not be here because we're about an hour early. We had a strong tailwind pushing us all the way through. And I'm just like,
wow.
Whoa.
So,
and that's when I started seeing the triple digits, and like 333 and 444 and 111 and 1111. And I'm just like, what is with the numbers? Like every time I looked at anything, I was seeing that. And it just, yeah, it was a lot.
So, okay, we can go any direction here. We've been going for a while.
A little over an hour.
Yeah. Do you want to go to? Is there anything current? Is there anything that happened recently? I know you have maybe even potentially like secret space program type of memories. I know you have Montauk memories. Do you want to cover some of that stuff, or do you want to go into the childhood? I'll let you decide.
Well, the Montauk stuff's really long. I guess we could go into maybe current events, like with the hurricane and everything. Since I've talked a little bit like about Katrina.
Sure.
Yeah, sure.
So it was after you moved out and went back home. I was walking through the park and I had my earbuds in, and when I had taken all the kids to school, I kept seeing all these fairy rings. And I was like, wow, there's a lot of fairy rings around town. They were everywhere. And so when I got to the park, I decided I was going to walk and see how many were around the park. And there was a really big one, and it had one opening. And I was told to go in, and I was like, oh, what if I don't come back out? And so I heard this group of beings ask me if I would be the human representative. And I was like, okay. So I went into this fairy ring, and then immediately I was like in a meeting of elementals and all the elementals. Like, I don't even know half of their kind of name, but they were very nice. And but they were having a meeting on whether or not they were going to reveal themselves and how they would reveal themselves to humans, and if they were ready. So my part was to listen and then answer if I thought that if humans were ready. And I had 3 experiences before this where I had usually it had to do with a tornado. I had what I called rebuked a tornado. And the first time was me kind of playing around when I was in the hospital after meeting Luellen. So I was 14 or 15. And then the other 2 was when I was at a house meeting for church, a tornado was up in the sky, and I told it to go back up in itself and dissipate. And I had gone up on my toes and was speaking in tongues, is what I called it. And it did. And it was even on the news. They talked about it. And the pastor or whoever elder of that meeting, he witnessed what happened to me. Brian caught me when I come back down from being on my toes, because it was just like very electrical coming up like that and telling it what to do. And so we went back in and they were looking at the news, and the forecaster said, it was weird. It was just like it turned up in itself and dissipated. And they looked at me. And then the other time Aaron witnessed me going into, and he mentions it in his book, where there was a tornado that was coming towards us, but they were not going to call it a tornado because it's Derby, and Derby doesn't get tornadoes. And but that happened to me again, where I started commanding in tongues and telling this to go away. And so I had those kind of experiences with elementals. And so they were talking to me about that because they felt like I was different than the other humans. And so they were asking me, how did I know to interact with the winds like that? And I told them I didn't know, that it just was something that would happen. And they said, is this something that happens with other humans? And I said, some, but very few. And they asked me if I thought that humans were ready for their appearance. And I said, no, not really. Mm-hmm. I said, but maybe in a few years. And they said, okay. And so that was the end of my part of it. I don't know if they talked about anything else, but they had me go ahead and leave. So what I had learned from that, though, was that it was elementals that were in the storms. And there was...
That makes so much sense why we see faces and the hurricanes and all kinds of anomalies like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So the one time, I don't remember, it was a few years back, there was a really bad storm that was out in the ocean that was going to hit Florida. And I remember I was driving out to my friend's house in the country, and I just started going into tongues. And it was like I was taken into that storm, and I'm driving. So I was on autopilot, hopefully, because we didn't wreck. But it was like I went into that storm, and there was a sprite in the storm. And it was like she was held up, like she had been kidnapped and was being tormented and used and to make this storm. And so I was asking her, is there any way that I can help you get free from this? And it was just like she wanted me to hold her and bring peace to her. And so that's what I did, is I started sending her love and peace and just trying to console her like I would my child. And the storm stopped. Whatever it was, it stopped. And they told me that they named the storms according to the spell that they cast on the storm, like what they want the storm to produce. So I have been asking if that was something that we could do for what's happening now. And I haven't gotten a clear answer, to be honest. It's like I keep hearing this scripture that what was meant for harm will be turned around for the good of those who believe. Like, it's something that, even though it doesn't make sense to our humanness, that, people perish and that things get destroyed, that for the greater good, something of this nature has to occur in order to rally and bring forth the truth and rally us together so that we can actually be that collective that we are.
Wow.
And I was just, it kind of broke my heart that, you know, but on the other hand, what I've been learning about ascension is that if you take the higher perspective and become the observer of what is going on, then you can see the overall picture of what will come about and how it transitions things for good, even though it looks so bad.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. That
Right.
was beautifully said, and it resonates.
Yes. Very.
And I think, like you said, from our human perspective, it doesn't make sense. But if we can zoom out and like forget about this vessel, right? This avatar,
Mm-hmm.
it really doesn't, like, you understand. I feel like it has to happen this way. Like you said, it's just not like gonna be enough of us getting together and protesting. It's not gonna
Right.
happen. It's not gonna happen like that, you know.
Right.
This has to be cataclysm. And unfortunately, there's casualties in that, but no one dies. And if you understand that,
Right.
you're just actually being like freed from your chains. And actually, in the Thea Uber prophecy in that book, when he's in his Lemurian life, he talked about them celebrating death. They
Mm-hmm.
didn't grieve or mourn. They celebrated it because they would see it as that person being broken free from their chains that were confining them in this physical body, right? And
Yeah.
they were able to break free and transition. So it was actually a beautiful thing when somebody transitioned. And if we can just change our perspective on that, that changes everything. And you can look at this right now as, even though there might be lives lost, they're just transitioning, and they might be able to help in this war in ways that we can't even imagine, ways they could never have in human form.
Spirit comes first, material comes second. And that's what we got to wake up to, is that that's actually our natural form, is spirit. This is more like a dream, the dream of form that we're in, and we're having an experience of physical reality, but it's the least real level of reality. But when you forget all that, when you're trapped, you know, and we've been intentionally, you know, suppressed, and that's been intentionally by the powers that were, you know, to keep us ignorant so we can be manipulated. Then you think this is all that's real, and that's where fear comes in, because you're so afraid of death. You're so afraid of things happening to this form, but this isn't real. This isn't the real you. This is just an experience.
Right.
It doesn't matter what happens to this.
Right.
And that's where, you know, once the more and more closer you get to mastery is when you're okay with whatever happens, because you know everything's happening for you, because we live in a divine conscious universe, that it doesn't matter what happens. Whatever needs to happen is what will happen, but it's your response that matters, that you can control. And that's where the power lies. Nothing outside of you. It's all within you. And that's where I think collectively humanity is being like, that lesson is really being intensified. And that's why things are so crazy and seemingly bad, but it's actually happening for us so that we can take our power back.
I think I learned that lesson early because of Brian dying. And, you know, that was one of the things that I was walked through, because I remember laying next to him and listening to him breathe. And there were times when he would stop. And I was just like, is this it? Is this happening right now? And then he'd breathe again. And I was just like, oh. And one of the times that happened, you know, I was told, what are you afraid of? And I was just like, all kinds of things, being by myself. Just, you know, I was just afraid of everything, because I always like to have everything planned out. Like, oh my gosh, I was a planner. I had it all planned out. And then I didn't, because he was sick and I couldn't, because I didn't know what the next day held. And so my guides walked me through that experience of him dying before he died, so that I could feel those feelings and not be afraid of them. Because actually, you're not really as afraid as what you think you are. You're afraid of feeling that emotion and not knowing what to do with it, because that isn't something that we have been taught. It's something that used to be taught, but we've lost that art of how to move through our emotions properly in order to manifest properly. So we're not overreacting and manifesting things in fear and through fear. And so that was something that I learned through that experience. And I would say, you know, I've gotten a little bit more lax in it, but I always said at first, he transitioned to light. He's not dead. He's more alive than we are. And I even saw him after he left his body, and he came up beside me and touched my shoulder and told me, you know, telepathically that it was going to be okay. And then I started seeing him in dreams. And one time I showed up with him getting ready to go through this fence into some meeting, and he had on a blue shirt and it had an emblem on the side of the arm. And it was, I've seen it before. It was like the leaves that come out like this, and then there was like a globe in the center of it. And I asked him, I said, "What are you doing?" And he goes, "Well, stuff that you guys can't." And I was like, "Oh." And he said, "What are you doing here?" And I said, "I don't know. I don't know how I got here." So it's true. They do get to do things that we can't, because they're on a different wavelength that our eyes are not trained to see anymore. But we'll see it one of these days. We'll get to see that, you know. But there's other wavelengths of light.
Yeah. And
that's where other things exist, but it's right here by us.
Other vibrations, but it's in the same space. Right. And as we ascend and as our DNA activates and our abilities come more online, we will start perceiving that more and more. And that's already happening. There's many people that are reporting that and having experiences.
Right. Well, this has been fantastic, and I know you have a lot more to share. Maybe we could have you back and we can get deeper into some of the other stuff. But just to go ahead and, you know, keep it at least somewhat semi short, let's go ahead and start wrapping this up. Is there anything, any final words, anything you'd like to share with the audience, how they can find you, if you're up to anything?
I'm just now starting to put myself out there more and more. So I know a lot of people reached out to me after one of my other interviews, and I honestly, I was so overwhelmed by the response to it that I didn't respond to very many. And I'm very sorry about that. I do apologize. I just wasn't prepared for the attention. So, I'm slowly moving into this. I'm still a mom of 4, 3 adults now, and 1 still in high school. So be patient, please, with me. I'll get to you as soon as I can. And I'm also working on my book and some other projects that I have in the making. So
that's great. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Can't wait to read your book.
Yeah. It'll be a great book. So the you didn't say, do you want to provide your email address or not?
Sure. It's okay. It's revoffire@gmail.com.
Okay, great. I mean, people will always want, you know, they'll want to reach out to you for sure. Sometimes, if anything, just because you're validating something that they experienced, and they like, and we help each other in that way. So it's beautiful.
Yeah.
Well,
thanks so much for coming on. This was
You're welcome.
So great to finally have you on the show.
Finally.
All these years, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So great.
It was all divinely timed, and you know, the message we got for this hurricane right now was beautiful, I think. And it's just all, like I said, divinely timed. And we thank you, and keep doing what you're doing. And because, you know, you're really on a special path as all of us, but shine your light, as you know. And guys, thank you for joining us. We can't do this without you. All the love and support, the Patreon subscribers, you know, the donations, all of it. We appreciate all of it more than you realize. And it's solely the thing that keeps us going. So thank you for that. Until next time, Aaron, did you have any last words?
No.
All right. Well, good night, everybody. We love you and have a great day or evening, wherever you are.
Night, guys.
Hello, and welcome to Conference Phone. If you know the name of the conference you'd like to attend, press 1.
Come on.
Using your touch-tone keypad, please enter the first 3 letters of the conference title now. You've selected Secret Space Conference? If that is correct, press 1.
What?
You've selected Full Disclosure Now. If this is correct, press 1. Why don't you just tell me the name of the conference you'd like to attend?
Rebels of Disclosure?
To find the venue nearest you, please enter your 5-digit zip code now. Why don't you just tell me where you want to attend the conference?
Pierre Marquette Lodge and Conference Center?
Rebels of Disclosure is playing at the Pierre Marquette Lodge and Conference Center in Grafton, Illinois, May 12th through 15th, 2025.
Yeah, now I got you.
If you would like to purchase tickets, please visit journeytotruth.online now.